Coming up, currency wars come to Moscow as G20 nations spar over the yen. Just don't expect any quick fix. And get ready to duck. It will be a close call as an asteroid the size of a football pitch hurtles past the Earth later today. So, after the spectacular failure of the G7 to speak with one voice, what hope for 20? Already the US has blocked a pledge on deficit reductions and China will oppose the agreed line on exchange rate targeting. And the meeting hasn't even started yet. Well, let's get over now to William de Vilder. He's Chief Investment Officer at BNP Paribas Investment Partners. He joins us from Brussels. Well, William, G20, currency wars, and as I said there, if G7 can't agree, if there's 2 or 3 interpretations on that, what hope for G20 to come across with a coherent statement?
Yeah, it would be a big leap of faith to expect that something very clear would come out of the G20 then. We have to keep in mind that we do not have a long tradition of very clear statements coming out of G7. Typically, the issue is that a currency is the ultimate expression of monetary autonomy. So countries will be very reluctant to give in to external pressure to commit to something. Also, there is an issue of, quote unquote, who started the fire. You can now say, well, Japan is getting really aggressive, but then they might say, well, what have the Americans done, or the British?
Well, exactly.
And so on and so on. So.
Well, you've mentioned the Japanese, the US and the UK. Earlier this morning, Bundesbank Chief Jens Weidmann, he was talking to Bloomberg, actually, and he said the ECB will not cut rates to weaken the euro. Hardly surprising, but still very significant in this context.
Yeah, I think it's indeed it's unsurprising as a statement. I think it's also very a good sense of realism there, in the sense that if you cut 25 basis points, it will not change an inch to the forces which are there. The Eurozone is a haven of monetary orthodoxy. And that is sometimes pulling in capital, but then you have weak GDP data and capital flows away. So you have this 2 conflicting forces which are influencing currencies, growth differentials on the one hand and monetary orthodoxy on the other hand. Okay,
just to finish up, if communication from central banks is getting a little more confused, what does that do to the great rotation trade out of cash and bonds into higher yielding assets? Is that still on, despite the central bank confusion?
It's still on. I don't think it's that much impacted by currency talk or currency miscommunication. I think the more important issue is that central banks start to emphasize the challenges that they're facing in preparing an exit strategy. Yesterday, Mervyn King was talking essentially about that. Then Mr. Bullard of the Fed has also said the same thing about the difficulty of a graceful exit. This is something that we may on sentiment, but I do think that as a trend for this year, the rotation will go on.
OK, William, thanks very much and have a great weekend. Well, let's catch up with some of the other business news headlines on Reuters this morning. Sources tell Reuters Toshiro Muto is the favoured candidate for governor of the Bank of Japan. Muto, a former deputy governor at the bank, would be a conservative reformer, and so he may be less likely to embark on more radical policy easing, which markets have come to expect. Japanese stocks fell more than 1% today. And a day after Rio Tinto posted its first ever annual loss, Anglo American reports a 44% drop in profit to $6.2 billion. This will be the last set of numbers released under outgoing chief executive Cynthia Carroll. Commerzbank says it expects provisions for bad loans to rise in 2013. Germany's second biggest bank will take a hit of around €500 million in the first quarter of the year from a move to cut between 4,000 and 6,000 jobs. And plane maker Airbus has just announced it is dropping the lithium-ion battery from its new A350 passenger jets. Fires in the battery have forced the grounding of rival Boeing's 787. Airbus now plans to use traditional but heavier batteries in its new plane. World News headlines today. South Africa's Blade Runner Oscar Pistorius is due to appear in court on charges of murdering his girlfriend. The arrest has stunned the nation, which regards him as a hero who has overcome adversity to become one of the world's finest athletes. An asteroid about half the size of a football field will pass closer to Earth than any other known object later today. At its closest approach, at around 17,000 miles, the asteroid will bring it nearer than the networks of television and weather satellites that ring the planet. That's it for now. I'll leave you with our pick of the day, which comes from Wuhan in China. Worshippers burn incense on the 5th day of Chinese Lunar New Year believed to be the day for welcoming the god of wealth into households. I'm Jamie McGeever. This is Reuters.